Welcome back. If me saying welcome back didn't make sense to you, then you probably are starting on the wrong video session. Please start with the first session covering examination scoping activities. Then you can enjoy this exciting session that focuses on the scope memo. Under a risk-focused examination approach, examiner resources are focused on a bank's highest risk areas. The examination approach for community banks are risk-focused processes that rely on an understanding of the institution, the performance of risk assessments, the development of a supervisory plan or examination scope, and examination procedures tailored to the institution's risk profile. From an examination standpoint, the scope memo is where the framework for the risk-focused examination begins. The scope memo is a critical piece to the overall scoping of an exam. It is the primary article to summarize for your review and document your discussions, financial and risk assessments, staffing, and final conclusions as you lead into the exam. The scope memo provides the roadmap for the exam, and just like any road trip, you may encounter detours along the way. For an exam, that may be in the form of changes to your staffing, dealing with non-responsive management, or expanding the scope, just to name a few. However, you still need a solid, well thought out plan, map, or in this case, scope, to get the journey started. As noted earlier in the first session, scope memos come in all shapes and sizes, and the format can vary greatly from state to state and amongst the federal agencies. Although, while the format will vary, the concept remains the same. A few items that should be covered in a scope memo include providing an institution overview and risk assessment. This includes detailing the key risk areas for the bank, a summary of any discussions that you as the EIC has held with bank management, notation or reference to prior examination findings, a summary of current period financial analysis, and a listing of the exam staff with their respective assignments, as well as any other key logistical information for the exam. These items typically include things such as the bank location, dress code, where to park, and anything else that's important for the staff to know. In elementary school, students are taught that the secret to a good story or writing assignment is in answering these basic questions. The same concept can be applied to an examination scope memo. We'll discuss each question on the following slides. An EIC will answer who by identifying key members of management and their areas of responsibility, as well as assigning exam staff to each of those areas. The who question will also be answered by gathering information from discussions held with management. To answer the what question, the EIC will focus on the exam expectations for each area. Remember, it all comes back to risk and focusing the exam effort on the areas with the most risk. With that in mind, the EIC will need to determine what level of review is necessary based on the associated risk in a particular area. In doing this, the EIC will list specific assignments or tasks for his exam or her exam staff, including specific work papers, work programs, and report comments. The next question is where. For the EIC, this would typically be split between off-site and on-site locations. There may be multiple on-site locations. For example, loans may be reviewed out of a loan production office in one building, while the other areas are best reviewed in the operations center across town. The EIC, working with management at the bank, must determine where it is best to have his or her staff. Of course, in our current environment, many states and agencies have moved to remote work only or on-site only if absolutely necessary. In those instances, the where becomes the individual's headquarters or home, or possibly a common office where appropriate safety measures can take place. Again, these are questions that the EIC must determine answers to and document within the scope memo. When? The EIC should document timelines for assisting examiners. These should be clearly delineated within the scope memo. As an EIC, be sure to give yourself sufficient time to allow for a critical review of assisting examiner comments and ensure proper follow-up on any resulting questions prior to their release from your exam. You may set pre-scheduled update meetings with those examiners overseeing larger areas, such as the asset quality lead or an operations manager. to determine if additional resources are necessary in a particular area and/or to gauge the success of current efforts in working toward the final goal. In addition, you may plan for set update meetings with both management of the bank and supervisory examiners to keep them apprised of the exam status. How? The EIC must document how the assignments will be completed. While the examiner assigned to the area will be performing the work, the EIC, through the scope document, will provide the measures for how that will be done. Be sure to comment on work programs, specific sampling requirements, and additional assignments for review. The scope memo is a great place to add specific questions or reminders you as the EIC want to be sure your assisting examiners follow up on. Again, the scope memo serves as the roadmap for your exam. Finally is the why. Often some background may be necessary for examiners and supervisory examiners to fully understand and appropriately implement examination techniques. The why is the information documented within the scope memo to support your risk assessment conclusions and work product assignments. The why is critical for a comprehensive, well thought out scope memo. Now let's watch an interesting video that covers the scoping process, highlighting the scope memo.
We finally have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see a state banking department get ready for an upcoming bank exam. We film these events over the course of several days as the examiner in charge, or EIC as they call it in the business, prepares for the exam.
All right, crew, we're getting ready for our next exam. Let's see who's going to be the EIC this time. All right, Sean. All right, Sean, first time EIC. Welcome to the big leagues.
Thanks.
You're going to have to complete a scope memo. Don't worry, there's a template. Just follow. Oh, you're going to want to call IT about that.
Financial analysis done. I've summarized my meeting with management. I've covered all the exam logistics, and I've completed my risk assessment. Scope memo is almost complete. All I need to do, the easy part, figure out staffing. Well, I'm pretty close to being done with the scope memo. I got a lot of my information done. I'm really just working on the staffing piece right now for the exam, and I'm having a little bit of difficulty. Got some of my crew, I'm trying to match up their personalities and their abilities with some of the assignments, and I'm struggling a little bit. I've been working on it for a few hours now, and hopefully I think I'm going to be done pretty soon. All right, so I've got my asset quality lead. I'm going to go with Dale. I know I can trust Dale. He's a good examiner. He's very good in credit. And I think, I think Dale likes me. So I'm going to go with Dale for asset quality lead. So BSA, AML, internal routines and controls, and audit. I'm gonna give all of that to Mary. Mary she's really good at multitasking. She is really experienced. She's nice. The only downside is she tends to take a lot of leave, but I think we're in the clear. I already checked with my supervisor. Nobody has any time off during this exam, so we should be good there. I'm going Mary for all of those areas. Okay, so I think I'm done now with the staffing. I'm just going to assign all the rest of the areas to the other two individuals in the crew. They're a little lesser experienced. They're really good, but they're a tad on the young side. All right, thanks guys. I really appreciate y'all meeting up in the break room today. I don't think this will take long. I just wanted to give you an update on some of the bigger risks that I'm seeing for our upcoming exam. So starting in the credit area, the past due ratio has been going up over the last 2 quarters, but it's still down compared to last exam. I think what we really need to dig into, really those 90
Is it
plus.
business casual dress?
No, it's business dress. Anyway, so like I was saying, so there are concerns in asset quality, but really market risk. That's the primary area of concern. We really need to
Are
look.
there any restaurants nearby?
Yeah, they just put a Chipotle in next door. But we're gonna really have to dig into those assumptions. Something in their interest rate risk model I hadn't seen before. And is pretty. What's the coffee setup there?
I don't know.
Okay, so anyways, like I was saying, guys, there's credit, there's market issues, but really the most important thing.
I'm going to need a little time off during this exam.
Okay, I wasn't aware that anybody was taking any time off. Okay, back to the drawing board.
Dale, I'm glad we were able to sit down here and talk with you finally here. How's it going?
Busy.
So you'll be the AQ lead on the exam. How does that sound? Are there any particular areas of asset quality that seem...
When this all first started, I was pretty nervous about being a first-time EIC and going through the entire scoping process, but now that I've done it, I feel really good about it. I think I have a much better understanding of the institution and their risks. I think we have a really good plan for the exam, and I think I have a great staff set up. I feel really good. I think this is going to be a great exam. Right, Dale?
Well, that's certainly one example of a scoping experience. Now, briefly on the next 2 slides, we'll discuss scoping on a joint examination. Regardless if the bank is a member or a non-member, coordination and communication is key. You'll need to discuss the approach that fulfills both agencies' expectations with your federal counterpart. It is best to schedule a meeting early in the process to discuss expectations and assignments. You will also need to determine which agency's scope memo will be completed, or in some cases, you may need to complete both. Remember, a joint examination means a joint process throughout, and that includes 2 EICs working together in every aspect, including the scoping activities. If unsure, discuss with your supervisor and determine which agency is processing the exam. There are often specific requirements for report format, work programs, and work paper documentation depending on the agency. You will need to work with your counterpart to determine staffing and to be sure to include him or her on any pre-examination correspondence, including emails and teleconferences. The joint exam process can be helpful, as you will have 2 EICs, which means another individual to help carry the responsibilities and workload. But it also means communication is even more critical. Communicate on how you plan to share responsibilities for the exam. Finally, there are clearly benefits to appropriate planning for anything, and that is especially true for a regulatory examination. As mentioned earlier, the exam approach for a community bank is a risk-focused process, relying on an understanding of the institution, performance of risk assessments, the development of a supervisory plan or scope memo, and ultimately, examination procedures tailored to the institution's risk profile. This will be very difficult without sufficient planning. However, With a comprehensive plan, the result will be an exam that is focused on the key risk areas of the institution, examiners that are empowered with better information to help them perform their duties, and a much more efficient exam that typically takes less time and results in a lower burden on the bank. You have completed the exam scoping module. Congratulations! Please remember to review the information received in Packet 1 for your specific case study institution. In addition, you're required to complete a scope memo based on that information using the scope memo template provided. This is required to be submitted no later than 1 week prior to the course start date. Please have the scope memo and any additional notes on the case study bank readily available during the class. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We look forward to seeing you in class virtually.